Hey, what's up, you guys? This is Movie Critic Rob here with the Movie Channel, and I am going to talk to you about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is a video that I have been meaning to do for a long time now, but I thought, hey, now that Doctor Strange has come out, and that's the reason why I was delayed making this video, I thought, well, now is a great time, seeing as we are 14 films and a copious amount of shows into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that now would be a fantastic time to dive into the Marvel Cinematic Universe in depth and look at what has worked, what hasn't worked, and why this is such an original idea and why it has worked to such a degree, because it worked. I mean, 14 movies in, every one of those movies has been a chart topper. Every single one. You don't do that and be lazy about it. So there is a lot of merit to be found here. So let's take a look at it. As you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe started now 8 years ago in 2008 with a little movie known as Iron Man. This movie set the bar high for comic book movies to come, and at this time, there was only the Nolan trilogy of superhero films that really had made a big impact, and I don't think, honestly, to this day, nothing has ever topped The Dark Knight. But now we have something different, and I think that's one of the reasons why it worked as well as it has, why the Marvel Cinematic Universe has worked as well as it has. The idea of a crossover is not something that is new. A lot of movies have had this, and even movies have not only done a crossover, but have really marketed their crossovers and done extensive crossovers, but nothing to the degree of building a universe of shows and movies that all are connected together to form this world, this universe, which in our case is called the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So let's go back 8 years in our heads for a second, and let's think about the current state, regardless of the Nolan trilogy, which is doing well at this point, the current state of comic book films at this time. Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, I mentioned both of them, Fantastic Four and Rise of the Silver Surfer. Ghost Rider, Blade, those were the movies that were known about, and the movies that had the most success. And I mean, you had the Burton Batman film, or Batman films, as well as the Schumachers. But a lot of people will tell you that there were also a lot of great missteps. And a lot of people still say that the Fantastic Four sequels were a misstep, along with some of the Batman films, and Daredevil is another notable one. So the Marvel, or the superhero genre as a whole, was not at all marketable, or did not have marketable success at this point, other than the Batman trilogy, which is something that is its own discussion, with the fall of the Batman name with the Schumacher films, and then its rise with the Nolan films. But other than Batman, there had not been another hero that was as marketable and that was working. Well, in 2008, not yet under Disney and not its own company either, Marvel Studios, under Paramount, released Iron Man. And it was a fantastic film. Not only was it a fantastic film, but Iron Man, at the end of Iron Man, which we get what now the Marvel Cinematic Universe is famous for, which is the after credits scene, set up the fact that there was going to be the Avengers Initiative. Now, at this point, which is still true to this day, Marvel Studios, the movie side of things, did not have rights to the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and Spider-Man. The first two, X-Men and Fantastic Four, along with all their villains, were owned by Fox, while Spider-Man and all of his amazing rogues gallery was owned by Sony because of Marvel Studios being bankrupt back in the 90s and them having to sell the movie rights. So the biggest thing that Marvel had left as far as movies were concerned was the Avengers. And so Iron Man 1, a fantastic movie directed by Jon Favreau, opened us up to this idea with its after credit scene, seeing Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, that now it was not just a standalone Iron Man film. This was going to be something leading to an Avengers film, which was awesome. So 2008, we saw that, and then in, I believe, 2009, The Incredible Hulk leaped onto the screen. Now, this is a movie which a lot of people see it as subpar, and it wasn't the best, but think about it. It's the sophomore outing of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You have to start somewhere. So, this movie, I love this movie. The effects are fantastic. The story is good. It's like a on-the-run kind of thriller with the superhero part at the end. But it works well. It gave us what I wanted, at least, from a Hulk film. And one thing that it did wisely, which it repeated again with the introduction of Spider-Man in Civil War, was because we'd had Ang Lee's Hulk film, which did not do well at all, that had given us the introduction to Hulk. It didn't feel the need to, with this movie, just have a rehash of the origin. So it gave us the origin in the credits at the beginning of the film. Absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of Easter eggs in the beginning credits of the film. A few mentions to Stark Industries. And the movie was fantastic. It had Tim Blake Nelson and Edward Norton playing the Hulk, Liv Tyler, Tim Roth, and William Hurt. We saw the Abomination for the first time, and we saw teases of the leader, which to this day, in 2016, we still haven't seen the leader fully realized yet, but I hope they're saving it for later. Now, one thing to note with Hulk is Hulk was distributed by Universal because Universal owns the distribution rights to the Hulk, even though it doesn't own production rights. Production rights, I believe, are Marvel's and now Disney's, but distribution rights were Universal's. After this movie came out, because it was it didn't do well in the market, although it was a good movie. Universal decided, we're not going to make any more Hulk movies, and Marvel can't make a standalone Hulk movie without Universal saying they're going to distribute it because they have the distribution rights. However, the loophole, which we know, if you've kept up with the MCU, is that the character of Hulk, along with characters that are in with Hulk, like the leader, like Abomination, could show up in team-up films, because then it's not a Hulk movie, it is an Avengers movie or a Thor movie, as we'll see next year, that the Hulk is in. Excellent. So, that's Hulk, which moves us now to Iron Man 2. This movie, I've often compared Batman v Superman to this movie, although this was more enjoyable than Batman v Superman. This movie suffered from, and again, the whole universe thing is new to everybody. This movie came out in 2010, so the whole movie universe building thing is new. And what this movie did, and its greatest downfall of the movie, was trying to cram too much in order to build the world to get to Avengers. Without this movie, you could not have Avengers, at least not in the way that Joss Whedon would have made it, because he would have had to have laid a lot of groundwork that wasn't there, that was done by this movie. So this movie, while it was not good, it did a lot of good in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we've seen the payoff of now with Avengers and going forward. The movie was not good, but it introduced us to Black Widow, introduced us to, I think it was, oh, Nick Fury had already been in there, but gave Nick Fury a little bit more to do, and gave us characters like Whiplash, which a lot of people say he didn't work. He works. He just could have worked a lot better, and I think the movie could have been done better if they hadn't have put so much into it. The shield portion of it just did not work as well as I would have liked. After this, we got Thor. I don't have Thor with me right now. Let a friend borrow it. But Thor is a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. I remember the hype for this movie. I remember all the posters where it was just faces and red and black, and it was like God of Thunder, God of Mischief, you know. And I think, and once I heard that Kenneth Branagh, who has directed Hamlet, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, was signed on to direct this movie, I was like, oh boy. If anybody can make a Thor movie make sense and be fun, this is the guy. And sure enough, he gave us a space opera with these larger-than-life characters and this larger-than-life family drama, which landed in so many ways and gave us the villain of Avengers, which we'll talk about later. So it introduced us to one of my favorite Avengers, Thor, played by Chris Hemsworth. Tom Hiddleston, it introduced Tom Hiddleston into the MCU, which he still loves to this day, and I can't wait to see them both in Thor Ragnarok now. But other than that, we got the cosmic side of the MCU. We got introduced to characters like Heimdall and the Destroyer and Odin and all these things that a lot of people thought this isn't going to translate well. Very well done, and it proved that this series, the cinematic universe, was on the way to really, really good things moving forward, because they were able to handle what could have been such a cheesy concept in a fantastic way. So fast forward 2011, and we have the first Avenger. I really like this movie. This movie, it gave you that 1940s vibe, and I know I wasn't alive in the 1940s, but it gave to me what it would have felt to have been a character like Steve Rogers, pre-serum and post-serum, in this world. He was a character of virtue, was a character of nobility, meaning he was a noble character, not that he was actually like, I'm Kriegel, but it introduced what is the moral center of the cinematic universe. Not only that, but it gave us Red Skull, and I still think he's going to show up later on, because if you watch this movie, he doesn't really die in the sense that we see him die, so we'll see. But this movie was the last one and introduced the last piece to get us to one of the magnum opuses of the MCU, and that is Marvel's The Avengers. Now, notable changes. At this point now, oh, I forgot to mention, Iron Man 2 recast. Yeah. Iron Man 2 recast War Machine, now being Don Cheadle instead of Terrence Howard. This movie recasts Hulk, not being Edward Norton anymore, but Mark Ruffalo, which to this day, now having seen the Hulk twice, the new Hulk twice, I still like the old design of the Hulk better, the 2008 design. It's a lot more brutal, a lot more vicious. But the Bruce Banner that is presented in this movie and in Age of Ultron nailed Bruce Banner, man. Nailed it, Mark Ruffalo. Joss Whedon. If there was anybody to bring in to do a team-up movie like this, it was Joss Whedon. And what I like about the movie is that the movie itself, the plot is very simplistic, okay? But one of the things that it did well is that it understands that it has to be about the character. So the plot, even though it's simple, it makes sense, it works, cool. it's fine that it's simple, because it's all about the characters on the screen now coming together. We've had them introduced. Everybody knows who they are. They've been keeping up, and this is the reward for keeping up. And that's one of the things that brings me to one of the things that why the MCU works so well. The MCU works well because it makes you watch these movies. Like, for example, I've just covered all of Phase 1, okay? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 movies, because I'm missing Hulk. It made you sit through 5 movies, but the payoff was so tremendous that you didn't care. And because you sat through all those movies, now you understand who these characters are and are able to enjoy interactions with these characters. And it worked marvelously well, as you know, because a lot of you went to see it and were able to make this movie one of the highest grossing films of all time to this day. And I really love this movie. I pop this in every once in a while. I love Loki in this movie. The only one I think is sidelined is Barton, but it works, and I think it was good because at the end you had him come back and the whole team was together and that epic music was swelling and all the fanboys are crying in their seats because they're watching the Avengers assemble for the first time in cinema in 2012. So after that, the question was, how do you take something that is built to this degree and that is introduced to us, the likes of Thanos, which got introduced here, and how do you make sense of them going back to their normal lives, and whenever a trouble arises, not call the Avengers? Because you're thinking, okay, the Avengers assembled, so any problem that each of these individuals have, hey, Hulk, can you come over here? Thor, can you come over here? That was not the case. And first up on the docket for Phase 2 was Iron Man 3. I have my dislikes about Iron Man 3. I love the Mandarin twist. That wasn't why I didn't love the film. That twist was amazing, and Shane Black, what he did there, absolutely amazing. What I didn't like is that he was still like, I am the Mandarin, I am the Mandarin. I didn't like that. And neither did the fans. So much so that they made a one-shot about it, which explains that there was a real Mandarin out there, and it was cool. Which brings me to another aspect of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which were the one-shots. One of the things that Marvel did was they took little concepts and they made one-shots about it. Like, there's one called A Funny Way on the Way to Thor's Hammer, or A Funny Thing That Happened on the Way to Thor's Hammer, with Jasper Sitwell and some other, and Phil Coulson, I think it was. Item 47, which has a couple that find a Shatari gun after the events of New York, and things like that to keep on building the universe. Whatever little corner of the universe they could fill in, they tried to do it with these one-shots, which worked. And after Avengers, and going along with Iron Man 3, came Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I'm going to do a video on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. specifically because there's 3 seasons of things to cover. There's a lot of things I want to say about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was created by Joss Whedon. And because it was created by Joss Whedon and his family, everybody thought it was going to be fantastic. The movie has just now come into its own in the 3rd season, and it took a lot for it to get there. And the whole reason why it existed was a mistake of understanding. Joss didn't understand what Marvel was asking of him, so he made a show. Because after Avengers, the Marvel heads decided, hey, let's put this guy in charge of Phase 2. Okay. So he made a TV show. TV show was good. It kind of went along with the MCU, but it never really touched the MCU. It was kind of its own little wing, and it felt really separated and isolated from the rest of the MCU, to the point where a lot of people have said, well, why is it even a thing? Why does it even exist? One of the things that it introduces very early on, because we're not getting a movie of them until 2019, maybe later now, with the delay, is the Inhumans. And there was a lukewarm reception on my part to the whole Inhumans thing. But now they've come into their own with Ghost Rider and with now tied into Doctor Strange a little bit with the magical side of the MCU. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But I wanted to say that about um, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because they came to be right around this time. And although, yes, it does fill in a lot of stuff and it gives you another dose of the MCU, it hadn't given me enough up until the last half of last season and everything in this season to warrant its existence. But as I'll mention in the video, there's a reason for that. And a show has to build. A show is not like a movie where you get 2 hours. You have to expand the storyline in hours and hours of television and make it make sense, make it cohesive, and make it fun. That's a lot to do and a lot of work. And it's a different medium. So I'm glad that now that we've seen the end result, which is a fantastic show in Season 3 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., now I can excuse the past 2 or 1.5 seasons because they were a little bland, because they were building. And I'm fine with that now. But going back to Iron Man 3. Like a lot of people said, you know, why doesn't Tony just call the Avengers? I like that he was kind of isolated, and it brought him back to the place that he was in Iron Man 1 when he was in the cave and he had to build himself out of a jam. Very well done. Shane Black directed this, not Jon Favreau, but Jon Favreau was in this as Happy Hogan, like he was in the other 2 films. And although it felt too different, which could be a good thing, but I don't know. This is one of the lower points of Marvel for me, even though it's one of the highest grossing Marvel films. It was one of the lower points for Marvel. Robert Downey Jr. is best as he's always been, and so is everybody else from the returning cast. But let's move on. This, to me, this next movie is probably the lowest point of the MCU. And it's because it doesn't really contribute anything other than introducing one of the Infinity Stones, which up to this point we had only been introduced to the Tesseract. And we know, if you keeping up with Avengers, the end credit scene for Avengers was Thanos, and okay, cool, so that's the end goal of all this, and we're still getting there, which will be the culmination of 3 phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But other than introducing the Ether, which is the Reality Stone of the whole Infinity Stone, that go in the Infinity Gauntlet thing, really didn't do much. The villain was really subpar. The story, while I love the first 2/3, it kind of was bland, and it went into just the same old villain gets defeated by the hero, and the hero never seems like he is in any danger of dying at any time. It always feels like he's going to get out. And I don't know, it was a real step down, especially from the last movie, the first Thor, which really knew what it was, which was a Shakespearean drama. Yes, it had action, but it sold you on the drama so that when it got to the action, it made you care about these characters. This movie didn't do that, and it's one of the weakest. It's probably the weakest of the Marvel films to date. But gladly that now those kind of the mid awkwardness of Iron Man 3 and Thor 2 were completely washed away by the masterpiece that James Gunn created in Guardians of the Galaxy. I have the exclusive Walmart sleeve with Groot, although I'll show you this. This is what it looks like. I bought the Blu-ray. This is when I started buying the Blu-rays. And then I went back and bought the Avengers Blu-ray because I got a Blu-ray player at this point. But I had to get the Groot sleeve because it's Groot. Come on. What this movie does, and I just watched it the other day on TV, rather than build to a team, it just gives us a team of characters, and it takes its time, develops the characters, develops the reason why they would go together, and it gave us a fun film that was off the beaten path for Marvel. James Gunn did amazing, and I'm looking forward to Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which is the next movie coming out in the MCU, now that Doctor Strange is out of the way. But this movie was absolutely fantastic. Although Ronan, he could fall into that unforgettable category. I think Lee Pace did an amazing job to where even though yes, he got axed, and I'm with, like I said with Red Skull, I don't think he's dead. But that's all I'm gonna say. If you haven't seen Guardians, I'm not gonna give away anything else. Although I will say this: if you haven't seen Guardians, what the heck are you doing? Go out and see Guardians right now. Go get it. Go get it on Redbox. Go buy it. Go see it, because this movie is fantastic. It was great. I love the humor. I love the music. The soundtrack for this is amazing. I have it on vinyl. I have it on CD. I would have had it on cassette if I would have bought it, but I didn't, because I'm like, yeah, 3 copies is a little excessive. But everything was done fantastically well. Even the villain, I thought was great. I love the villain. I love the side characters like Yondu and Nebula. Everybody felt that they were there for a reason. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what this team is going to be doing come Phase 3 now with their own movie, and then crossing into the big, huge, humongous film that's going to be the Infinity War Avengers 3 movie and its sequel, which is untitled at this point still. After that, we got arguably Marvel's best film to date. And although Marvel had done a lot of big, bombastic things, which were fantastic, like Avengers, this movie, directed by the amazing Russo brothers, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, gave us as close as we come to a Dark Knight-ish film. And I mean that to say, because it wasn't like, it's not a mob drama, but I'm talking about a dark, realistic movie that was in keeping with the tone of the MCU, but really sold the dramatic side. And Marcus and McFeely, who wrote this along with the first Avengers, completely blew out of the water any expectations anybody had of any Marvel movie, much less a Captain America movie, because the first Avenger, while enjoyable, was a little campy. It was okay. I love it, but it was okay. But this movie really was like, poof. And I'm so glad that they came back and directed Civil War, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and also that they're going to direct Infinity War, because one thing that I've noticed with the Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe Russo, is that they know how to balance character. This movie has a lot of characters, but it doesn't feel like there's a lot, because they do a good enough job, an excellent job, in balancing the characters out. At this point in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, maybe a little bit sooner than this, Agent Carter came out on TV, on ABC, and it was kind of the in-between series for when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was resting. I liked Agent Carter, but it wasn't, I don't know, because I stopped watching it after a while, because it was just kind of like, okay, whatever. I really hoped it would have continued, because I think that it would have done the same thing that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is doing now, where it's fantastic. I think it would have gotten there. It just needed some time, because, again, it's a TV show. And at this time also, we got the beginning of the Netflix side of the MCU. Started with Daredevil Season 1. Oh my gosh! Daredevil Season 1. Which is about to release on DVD, and I'm so excited. Daredevil Season 1 was fantastic. Everybody that was anybody was comparing it to Ben Affleck's Daredevil movie from decades before. Well, a decade before. And so everybody was cautious about the Daredevil Netflix. Boy, were they wrong. And it was amazing. Wilson Fisk, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, was fantastic. Charlie Cox as Daredevil, and Matt Murdock, just the dude. Oh my gosh. The choreography in this show, the fight scenes in this show, the tension building in this show, just everything was done perfectly right. With a 13-episode length, they gave it breath and life to Hell's Kitchen, and they sold it. After that came Jessica Jones, which I love Jessica Jones. It's such a great show. It's what Netflix did was it was able to give us darker MCU stories. And there's a lot of violence in Daredevil. There's a lot of sex in Jessica Jones. Um, and Luke Cage is kind of a hybrid of the two. But Jessica Jones was fantastic. It gave us Kilgrave, played by David Tennant, which had all of the fangirls of Doctor Who swooning. And fantastic show. Then Daredevil Season 2 introduced us to Punisher and Elektra, and gave us, what was it? Punisher and Elektra. Can't remember Marvel Season 2 or Daredevil Season 2 because I have Luke Cage on my mind. But it was fantastic. It was not as good. No, I don't think any of them have come close to getting to Daredevil's. Daredevil is perfect. A TV show on Netflix as you can get, with its tension build up and everything. But Season 2 came absolutely close, and Frank Castle blew away any other Punisher that had come before him with extreme ease. Then Luke Cage came after, and I know I'm kind of getting ahead of myself in the timeline, but I want to go and address all the Netflix shows at once. Luke Cage, I thought was fantastic. I haven't finished it yet, but everything I've seen, it's such an enjoyable show. It's such a fun show. And all the characters in the Netflix series, whether it be the Daredevil characters, the Jessica Jones characters, or the Luke Cage characters, although they cross over a lot, are so well fleshed out. It's just a great thing to watch. It's just fantastic. So, the culmination of Phase 2. Dun, 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 introducing one of the biggest bads of the Avengers, Ultron, in Avengers Age of Ultron. Once again, directed by Joss Whedon. A lot of people give this movie a lot of flack. I don't give it a lot of flack, but I know it could have been better, maybe. I think it would have benefited from a longer runtime because it does a lot. And unlike Iron Man 2, where it felt like it bogged down the movie, this one didn't bog it down as much. It just kind of made it feel a little cluttered. That's not to say the movie isn't bad. The movie has fantastic moments, including the birth of the Vision, and all the character moments where you see everybody together. It's just fantastic. Ultron, I thought, was great, because with Ultron, he has the possibility of coming back. And I hope that he does, because I loved him here, and I think he could do really good things or really bad things to the Avengers moving forward. I thought Joss Whedon did a good job, but fans, I did my whole thing about Marvel fanboys before, and I'm not going to go at it again, but fanboys destroyed Joss Whedon because of this movie. And y'all should be ashamed of yourselves. This movie was good. It was not great, but you do not bash people like that. It was terrible. Come on. The man had a lot on his plate, and you saw that. And everybody that was involved in the production knew that he was overtired and he was affected. I mean, he was running on Phase 2 for crying out loud. But he gave us a great movie. And I'm glad. Joss Whedon, do your thing, and I hope you come back to the MCU to do something else. Maybe a Black Widow film? So, yeah. Now, we get to see the ending, because that was the culmination of Phase 2, but Phase 2 had one more movie to give us, and that was Ant-Man. I love this movie. This movie's so much fun. Paul Rudd as Ant-Man, and gave us Michael Douglas as Hank Pym. He was, of course, Scott Lang. Gave us Yellow Jacket, as well as Luis, who was a standout character of the movie. Evangeline Lilly played Hank Pym's daughter. And it gave us another side, the tiny side of the MCU. I thoroughly enjoy this film. One of the things that really gets my attention with Ant-Man is in the scene that takes place in I think it's in the 90s or the 80s. I think it's in 1984. Where we see a young Hank Pym. Oh my gosh, the dude looks real. The dude looks like he just stepped out of the movie Wall Street, the original Wall Street, and is there. It doesn't feel like an effect. It was that well done. extremely well done. Like, I can't get past that scene without always just being in awe of what Marvel, the creative teams at Marvel and ILM were able to do there. Just fantastic. And it doesn't feel like an effect, and that's what it's supposed to be. It should not feel like an effect. This movie is hilarious, by the way. This movie doubles down on that Marvel humor, but it works so incredibly well because the character's funny, and Paul Rudd is funny. And I think the way that Marvel has cast, even the recastings, the way Marvel has cast its universe, it's fantastic because it takes unknown actors that they don't have to pay a lot of money to, which keeps it frugal, but at the same time not stingy, and gives us new talent that they know can blossom. You know, who heard of Chris Hemsworth before Thor? Now everybody knows who Chris Hemsworth is. Tom Hiddleston. They gave Robert Downey Jr. its rise to fame after his whole drug thing, and now he is one of the most epic characters, Iron Man, in the entire world, where everybody knows who he is, and he has affected not just the movie side, but the comic side, to where now people are drawing Iron Man like Robert Downey Jr. That's fantastic, and Marvel has done that over and over and over and over again with every single character, even the ones that are forgettable. They do not cast in a bad way. Even Anton Benko, come on, the dude, Mickey Rourke, was born to play Whiplash. It casts this movie fantastically well, and this is absolutely no exception whatsoever. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. I'm going to go back, which is rare. This movie also introduces to two new members of the Avengers team, other than Vision, which was Pietro and Wanda Maximoff. Although Pietro kind of had a misstep, pun intended, in this movie, it gave us Wanda Maximoff. And Elizabeth Olsen, you rock. You're amazing. And last but not least, because I don't have the physical copy of Doctor Strange, although I'm going to talk about him a little bit, Civil War. Joe and Anthony Russo they left the ballpark in the first 30 minutes, and the ball just kept on going and kept on going and kept on going. This movie introduced us to Black Panther, introduced us to Spider-Man, the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man. It gave us the beginnings of Baron Zemo. It gave us elements from the Civil War comic and adapted the Civil War storyline into the MCU in such a beautiful way that it made everything like it was one of those rare instances where you kind of felt like all the threads in the universe come together in one moment. Gave us William Hurt back from an Incredible Hulk, who we had not seen anybody from the Incredible Hulk in 8 years. Wow. Well, 7 years, because it came out in 2009. But come on, give credit where credit is due. The movie is extremely well balanced. It does not feel overwhelming, and it does not feel like it's overwhelmed by its own weight. The balance is fantastic, and come on, let's talk about the airport fight scene. Pure gold. Tom Holland and Chadwick Boseman rock it as Black Panther and Spider-Man. I know I kind of switched them up, whatever. Even, come on, let's talk about casting for a second. Even Rocket Raccoon, Bradley Cooper. Oh, you made us care about a raccoon, Marvel. I love Rocket. Anyway, go back to Civil War. If this is indication, if this and Doctor Strange are indication of things to come for Marvel, there is no slowing down for Marvel. And I'm so glad, because it was fantastic. And this movie, what it did, and what I love about this movie, is it gave us the big fight in the middle. It kind of did something that Nolan is famous for, and gave us a more personal ending instead of a big bombastic ending, which kind of went against the grain of even Marvel, because Marvel does its big bombastic endings and gives, character moments in the middle. It turned that formula on its head, and it was so good for it. Excellently done, Russos. I can't wait to see what you're going to do with Avengers 3 and Avengers 4. But yeah. And then we have Doctor Strange, which you know what? Give me a second. I don't have a box for Doctor Strange, but I did get a poster for Doctor Strange, and so I'm going to hold that up. Scott Derrickson, who is famous for directing horror movies, has come into the MCU and has brought with him the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange, and the magic side of the MCU, and the now, I guess, Marvel Cinematic Multiverse. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm not going to spoil anything. The movie is supremely well casted. Benedict Cumberbatch was born to play this role, and I'm glad that Marvel delayed this movie to get him, because he is the only guy that could have played this, and he does it fantastically well. Baron Mordo, the Ancient One, all of these characters, amazingly realized. Benjamin Bratt plays a character in this. If you don't know who Benjamin Bratt is, go see Despicable Me 2, and go see, I think it's season 7 or season 8 of the show 24. Excellent actor, great castings all around, and I'm really excited to see what they're going to do in the future, because next we have Guardians of the Galaxy 2, as well as Spider-Man Homecoming and Thor Ragnarok in 2017 coming up. I could not be more excited. Now let's talk about what worked. The TV side of Marvel, not Netflix, the ABC side, it took a while to develop. And again, it's a TV show, so it's going to take a while. But it was a little slow going to the point where I almost tuned out. And I did for a little bit, because I was like, whatever. And you could still watch the movies and it would still make sense without this. So I was like, okay, whatever. But then it commanded me to go back, because it was like, oh, it's getting good now. Okay, I heard from a lot of people. And then season 3 blew out of the water. It has had misstep with having to recast for whatever reasons. Rhodey was recast, and who else was recast? Somebody else was recast. Oh, of course. Mark Ruffalo was cast as Hulk from Edward Norton. But even though everything that has happened, it works. And be you whoever you may that wants to discredit the Marvel Cinematic Universe and what Kevin Feige has done and what Marvel and Disney has done, there is no mistaking that taking an original concept, such as building a universe out of a string of films and having them cohesively mix in the same world, is something that is brand new. Crossovers are not new, but this brand of crossover is absolutely new. Not anymore, because we are 8 years into this, but they were the pioneers. And there was hard ground, and there was good ground, and we are now at the point with phase 3 of the cinematic universe that we are reaping the benefits of having stuck around for 8 years with Marvel, and now we're getting crossovers of different people with different people. Hulk is going to be in Thor, and the Guardians are going to be in Infinity War with the Avengers, and this is a great time to be alive, and it's because Marvel has taken its time, given breath, space to breathe for these movies, built up the anticipation for these movies with each other, and to the point where it has not had a misstep. Every single Marvel film, all 14 films, have been #1 at the box office for the first week and more weeks after that, but especially the first week. They really have done a great job. That's not to say everything was great, because they have had some missteps, especially on the TV side, and even some of the movies were missteps. I mean, I talked about how Thor 2 was, I think, the lowest point of Marvel, and Iron Man 2 tried to cram it a lot. But in the grand scheme of things, what's 1 or 2 little missteps? And even the missteps, they weren't that bad. It was just, you knew it was a step down from what you were used to. So what can I say? It has done an amazing job. I'm glad to be a fan, and even I'm a fan of DC too. Don't get me wrong, But I would hope they take their time more instead of trying to rush it, because if I've learned anything from Marvel, it pays off in spades. This has been Movie Critic Rob with the Movie Channel. I was so glad I got to do this and show you guys this, but now I'm signing off.